Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten. I am the Executive Director of the Chapel in York UK Foundation. This is, I think, my first Chapel in York webinar, so I'm so pleased to see you all. I'm delighted to see some familiar faces out there. I see a few that I don't know, and I hope we can connect after this. Today, we're going to be talking about fundraising in the UK, but before we do that, I'd like to introduce a couple other Chapel in York staff members who are with me today. We have Nancy Bixon, who is the Executive or Managing Director of Chapel in York. I'm so happy to have Nancy on the phone today. And we have Jenny Elms, and Jenny is the head of UK Entity Services for Chapel in York. And they'll be supporting us throughout the call today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I think people are still continuing to join us. A couple of things before we get into kind of our formal discussion. We're here to talk about all things UK fundraising and to answer questions that you have about UK fundraising on any topic. But we are going to start with kind of the basics of gift aid, particularly for people who aren't frequently fundraising in the UK. It's a really important subject. Now, I am aware there are some British organizations on the call, so you may know quite a lot of what we are talking through today on gift aid, but please bear with us. We know you know this, and we will get to questions very soon. So after we talk through just a few slides, which I'm going to share in a minute, I would love to open the group up to any questions around gift aid, really, or anything you're wondering about UK fundraising. And if that makes sense to everybody, I think we'll go ahead and get started with just a really brief presentation outlining what gift aid does and how it works. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I think I just heard somebody. If you aren't on mute at this point, I'd be really grateful if you did, just for everyone else. And then you're welcome to come off mute when you have questions after the presentation. So we're going to talk today about fundraising in the UK with Nancy and me. We've already done introductions. And we're going to really focus on what is gift aid? Why is gift aid so incredibly important to fundraising in the UK? And if you are an overseas organization that is fundraising in the UK, we'll talk a little bit about how you do this thing called gift aid and why it's such a benefit to your organization. So very quickly, what is gift aid? Well, it's a program that allows charities, registered charities, to collect 25p on most gifts made by UK taxpayers. And there are some really important words in there that we're going to talk about. Registered charities is an important one. Most gifts is also important, and taxpayers is important. So we'll come back around to those and we'll talk about those in a little more detail in a minute. So here's what I thought when I moved to the UK and started fundraising in the UK, and someone told me that there was a way to get 25% more out of every gift I raised, and I got credit for it because that was all part of UK fundraising. I thought, you must be kidding. And then I thought, how on earth does this work? I'm used to a system, of course, in the US where the donor gets a tax credit or a tax deduction on gifts they make. I've never heard of anything that gives that money to the charity. So how does this work? If you are a registered charity in the UK, or you have a UK Chapel in York Foundation, this is the basic. It's a little more complicated than this, but this is the basic plot for gift aid in the UK. So a donor, a taxpayer, makes a personal voluntary gift to your organization. That donor either signs a short form confirming that they've paid income tax or capital gains tax in the last year, or they tick a box on an online form, we'll look at that in a minute, that says that they have done that, and they provide their name and at least part of their address. This has become a lot simpler in the last few years and a lot smoother in terms of that seamless experience for the donor. we call that a gift aid declaration, and the gift aid declaration can cover all gifts for the last 4 years. So you don't need to ask for a gift aid declaration every time a donor makes a gift to your organization. You can keep that on file, and that will hold you for 4 years. So now you have the gift and you have the gift aid declaration. You now report the gift through to His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, HMRC, through an established process. This used to be really complicated. There are now pieces of software that can help you do this. And then within a limited time frame, and this can drag a little, but the UK government essentially gives you as the registered charity back the tax that the donor paid on the gift they made when they made it, and they paid income tax. Now that tax varies, but the HMRC assumes that it is about 25% of the gift. So you as the charity get the income tax the donor paid on that tax or paid on that money when he or she made the money, when they made the money. So here's what a basic online gift aid declaration looks like. This is the one obviously provided by Chapel in York if you have a Chapel in York gift page. So there's a little explanation of gift aid. We'll talk about why there is that in a minute. And then you tick a box that says, yes, I am happy for all gifts of money that I've made to the Chapel in York UK Foundation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because when the person's made the gift, they've already provided you some address information, that's it. That's all you need. There needs to be the explanation at the bottom of the gift aid form. You must be a UK taxpayer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you are a UK taxpayer, but you try to claim gift aid on more than the total of the tax that you made in the year, HMRC will not give that money to the charity. So HMRC does check before they release money to the charity. So some gift aid math. This is why this really matters. And this is why, in many cases, this is why charities do set up UK entities, and why the UK Foundation at Chapel in York is so popular. It's because the money adds up pretty fast. So a £100 gift, you have probably already done this maths in your head, $125. You get the £100 gift, or £125. You get the £100 gift. You get 25% of that gift in addition handed back to you. So that would be £25 in this case. And the total is £125. The numbers go up pretty quickly. So for £10,000, you have an extra £2,500. With a £100,000 gift, you have 25% and you have £125,000. So you start talking about real money very, very quickly here. There is one piece that we're not going to go into in great detail unless Nancy is really, really keen to dive into it. And that is higher rate taxpayers. So if you have a donor who is a taxpayer and pays the top rate tax, pays higher tax, they can claim as a tax deduction the margin between the 25% that goes to the charity as the gift aid and what they paid. That's a little more complicated. If you're curious about how that works, let us know and we can explain it to you. But just enough to say, if you have somebody who is a very high earner and therefore pays a high rate of tax on their income, they can probably get a small tax deduction while giving you the gift aid. It's another incentive for donors to give. So what do you need to know about gift aid? There are special rules for funds raised in a variety of ways: auctions, event tickets. Oh, I've auctioned in there twice. Sorry, charity shops, sponsorships, that kind of thing. So if you're talking about income and you want to know if you can claim gift aid on income from any of these kinds of activities, you'll need to go to the HMRC website on gift aid and find out what the detail is there before you claim gift aid. You can't claim gift aid on funds from pay-as-you-earn shares, that kind of thing. Again, this is in greater detail on the HMRC website. You need to have a complete gift aid record on file for each gift, but you only have to have, or for each donor, but you only have to have one every 4 years. Now, this, I mentioned this earlier. Donors can be very suspicious of authorizing gift aid. There is a fear, there is a misunderstanding that the government is therefore getting all kinds of financial information from the donor that they don't want to share. There is suspicion that the money is somehow, that extra 25% is somehow going to come from the donor's income instead of from the government. So they reckon that there's billions out there in unclaimed gift aid because people just don't authorize it because they're suspicious of it. There are some really good guides online that help you talk about gift aid to donors in a way that helps them understand and makes them not suspicious. So as an organization, you may have to educate people, but it's absolutely worth it. And then claiming back from the government can take a bit of time. If you are a member of the Chapel in York UK Foundation, we'll do it for you. If there was ever a better reason to get to become part of the Chapel in York UK Foundation, I don't know what that would be. So pitfalls to avoid. And Nancy, at the end of my 5 bullets here, I'm going to throw over to you and see if you have a few more pitfalls of gift aid you want to share with us. So some things to avoid. Trying to claim with insufficient information about the donor. There is another clause. There are lots of clauses. There are lots of exceptions in gift aid. It has been in the past few years, they've created an exemption for if you have lots of small gifts that are kind of gathered together. Again, I will leave you to investigate that further, but there is an exception on having donor information there. But if you want to claim gift aid on a normal gift that comes to you, insufficient information about the gift aid will keep you from claiming that gift aid. Exceeding the limit of benefits provided to the donor for their gift. Now, this gets into memberships and event tickets and auction items and things like that, but you have to keep in mind what you're giving the donor in exchange for their gift. And there's a limit to that. There's a threshold to that. If you give the donor more than that threshold, you can't claim gift aid on the gift. It has to be a gift, in other words, rather than an exchange of some kind. Ignoring special rules for special circumstances like event tickets, auctions, sponsorships, that sort of thing. Trying to claim for a donor who does not pay UK income tax or capital gains tax. You cannot claim gift aid on a donor who does not do that. Trying to claim gift aid on an estate. You cannot claim gift aid on an estate. Nancy, any other pitfalls to avoid about gift aid?
I think the biggest thing for those of you that are on this call that are not UK charities is that you have to be a UK charity to be able to claim gift aid. So I think we've even got a question about this. So even if you're registered in the US, you cannot get gift aid. The rule is for UK charities. So you have to either decide whether you're setting up your own UK charity or whether you're using an intermediary like the Chapel in York UK Foundation. Because if, for example, I can only talk about what we do with this, but if you're using us, then you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to worry about this because we make sure that you've got the right words on the gift aid form. We make sure that that all these things are happening, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so what Kirsten has tried to do here is to set out the sort of what the scheme, we call it schemes in the UK, by the way, for other English speakers for whom scheme is a terrible word. We call it a scheme. For whom this scheme works, you have to, this is something where you don't do it, basically. I mean, it's going to have to be done by a UK charity. And it's the UK charity that's going to have the relationship. It's the UK charity who's going to be doing all the stuff. But at least this is giving you some idea of what this is about, because as Kirsten started out with, this is a huge thing.
It's a huge thing.
You get 25% more without having to do anything except make certain that you've got something in the UK that can do this gift aid for you is just a wonderful thing. And so so many people don't know about this and don't understand it, and so sort of don't think about the UK as one of their top markets. And yet, as Kirsten showed you with the figures, I mean, getting £25,000 extra for a donation of 100,000 is just a really big benefit for you.
Well,
And
and it honestly pays for your membership really fast if you
yeah,
get a couple of not even big gifts, a couple of just kind of really solid leadership gifts. Your Chapel in York membership is paid for immediately. And I really cannot emphasize this enough. Trying to claim gift aid really can be, as we would say in the UK, quite a faff. If you are doing it yourself. I know one organization, I won't name them, it might be here. I know a major London university that didn't claim gift aid for at least 18 months, which they can do. They can hold off. They will still get the gift aid, but they didn't claim it for 18 months because it was such a faff. So having somebody who can do it for you is an absolute huge advantage. I'm just gonna flip through my last slide and then I will take it off sharing. And we can go back to my slide. I may take it off sharing now. I'm going to stop sharing now because I was just going to say the last slide is if you have any questions about any of this, Nancy is happy to answer questions. As the executive director of the UK Chapel in York Foundation, I'm very happy to answer questions and at your disposal. There are a couple of places online that you can go. I've mentioned the government website, HMRC. Charity Excellence also has some really good information on how gift aid works and some of the things to avoid. All of the major charities have pages on gift aid that explains gift aid. So if you have any questions, there's a huge amount of information online. I'm happy to talk. Nancy's happy to talk. But if you are considering a Chapel in York Foundation, I think in the UK, I think this would be a great reason to do that.
yeah, any UK charity will work. I mean, any
Yes.
UK charity will partner with you. Obviously, we're here not to just sell the UK Foundation or whatever or Chapel in York. But you do need a registered charity in the UK to work with you. That's the bottom line on this, is that wherever you might be, it's got to have you've got to have a UK charity, and that UK charity, I mean, what it almost means too is all the CRM systems are set up in this country to be able to automatically, in many cases, do gift aid, etc. It's just such a wonderful opportunity for charities, obviously in the UK, but also charities outside the UK, to increase the amount that you get. So I think that if anybody has any questions, if you put it in the chat, we'll come on to it either now or whatever. And I think, Kirsten, you wanted to talk a little bit just about the whole, why besides getting more money, why would anybody in the UK ever want to support anything outside the UK anyway?
It's a really good question, Nancy. And for universities, certainly, there will be the diaspora from your university, and we'd be very likely to have a lot of people in the UK, particularly in London, Manchester, Edinburgh, one of the big cities, and most US alum that I know who live in the UK live in the UK, love the UK, but myself included, still continue to contribute to their US university. In terms of US charities who have people in the UK, there are lots of US charities that have a diaspora of supporters all over the world, who continue to want to give back to the US, to a US charity or a charity located in any other country in the world. The UK tracks people from everywhere, and many of those people are immigrants, or have connections anywhere else in the world. And so you want to make sure that they have a way to support you in a way that you get maximum benefit, that you get the gift aid, and they can continue to have that really warm and supportive relationship with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we know that lots of universities in the Commonwealth have a lot of alumni here. So, when you're rushing off to fundraise from them in other countries or the States, as lots of people do first, this is obviously a place you don't want to just fly over. You want to make sure we do it. I mean, and of course, for those organizations that are arts organizations, you know, Brits are good travelers. We go to Europe, we go to
Yeah,
museums, we go all over the
yes,
place, and sometimes we're
yeah.
even visible. Capturing people and ensuring that you can accept philanthropic donations from them, and from your, from anybody. But certainly, there's a within Europe, there's a lot of British people that are visiting you, and throughout the world. So this is a market that, because of gift aid, it really pushes us up the food chain in terms of where you should be thinking about where you want to fundraise from, whether it's as Kirsten said, from the alumni, whether it's from the people who visit you because of what you are, or because you're a charity that's doing something which has an international appeal. So, this is a big shout out for the fact that we are a really great place to fundraise from. And in fact, charity used to mean, when the really the legal and things of charity was international. It was all about international, and now it's obviously broader than that.
Well, and I would say there have been a lot of, I hear British fundraisers talk a lot about how British people are not as generous as people in other countries. And there are a lot of other countries that are very generous. I think it's incorrect. My experience has been that British people are incredibly generous. They're very concerned about what's going on in the rest of the world. They very much want to support the charities that are helping in all of the places that need help around the world. Um, and they can be very savvy about gift aid. They want to make sure that you get the full value of any kind of gift that they happen to give you. So UK population is really generous, and tapping into that, globally is a really good idea. Nancy, we do have a question in the chat from Beatrice. Hope I'm not mispronouncing that terribly. What is the average amount of fees for a nonprofit registered in UK charity to be a member of the Chapel in York Foundation? Nancy, do you
Well,
want to take that, or would you like me to?
go for it. You're the executive director.
I
So
am the executive director. I'm going to share my screen again because I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. So if you bear with me for 2 seconds.
whilst you're doing that, it's worth saying
Yeah.
that um, we the, we have foundations in a number of countries, and basically the fees are the same for all of the countries. We're in the US, the Canada, the Netherlands, which is also becoming registered in France and Spain and Switzerland, and Hong Kong. So this is what you're looking at is the same for all of them. There is discounts for smaller, if you have more than one. But Go for it, Kirsten.
Yeah, so you've got several options, which is good, and helps you to be really, really flexible, which is important. So we got three options. The first one is the 90-day temporary fund. Now, this is fantastic if you know that you have a big gift coming through from the UK, and you want to make sure your donor can give in the UK to support your organization. You want to make sure that you get the gift aid on the gift. This is how you get a foundation for 90 days. So the foundation itself is free. If you scroll down, you see a little bit more about what you get for a 90-day temporary fund on the left. The payment comes from the money that supports Chapel in York comes from a 5% retention rate. So we take 5% off the top of the gift. Other than that, there is no fee. So other than that, you are you're covered. So that's fantastic. If you have a big gift or have a couple of big gifts or expect a raft of big gifts for some very specific campaign to come through all at the same time, a 90-day temporary fund definitely is what you want to go for. The affiliate fund, slightly more expensive, I think fairly reasonable. I'm going to scroll down again. You see the retention rate drops. So the amount that we take off the top of the gift drops, which is great. And you get all the membership benefits listed above. And you also get monthly donation reports. Now, this is obviously really, really key because you want to see if your foundation is working. You want to be able to reconcile the money that you know that should come in with the money that that you're seeing. Nancy, with the affiliate fund, are you also able to see? You're not able to see your donations in live time, are you?
No, you're always able to see donations in live time. So we put
Perfect.
donations into a SharePoint because we know that it's absolutely crucial as fundraisers that you are able to steward those donations when they come in. That's absolutely bottom line. We are there to help you with your donors and things. So you always know exactly what's going on with donations.
Fabulous. So it's a seamless experience for your donors basically because you do know as things come in you're able to see them, which is really helpful. People sometimes worry about that with international donations. The last option is a named fund, £2,500 for a named fund. You get all the benefits of that are listed above. The fee is the retention rate is a 1% retention rate. You get monthly donation reports, access to donation information on the donor portal. And in all of these, for all of these funds, money would be issued quarterly. So the money is dispersed quarterly. So and the gift aid as well is dispersed quarterly. When we have our UK Foundation board meeting. But yeah, so that Beatrice, does that answer your question? Does that give you the information that you need? You can go ahead and take yourself off mute if you'd like. Nope. Okay. Hopefully that answers Beatrice's question. Are there any other questions?
It may be worth, Kristen, just mentioning whilst we're looking at this. I mean, there are actually there are not very many other solutions, other organizations that have UK charities that do this kind of work. Um, but it's really important to understand that one, the donation comes into the foundation, and the receipting is done from the foundation. The gift aid is applied for in the foundation. The grants are made to you from the foundation. So all the legal things are handled by the foundation. There is actually, yes, you would qualify for gift aid. Isla said, when you have a fund with us, that's sort of the point of the exercise is to do that. The other alternative, and so I've been doing this for almost 30 years now, and almost 30 years ago, we would have said you need to set up a UK registered charity, or you need to set up a US 501c3 or one in Hong Kong or whatever. But increasingly, we know that the regulatory requirements are just going through the roof in every country, and
Yeah.
even more difficult is banking. And banking is such a nuisance in terms of trying to get bank accounts, have problems with bank accounts, getting people on bank accounts, people off bank accounts, etc. That not having to have a charity and to deal with all of those things yourself, plus the whole volunteer management of
Yeah,
of stewarding a
exactly.
board, etc., can be immense. Now, for some organizations on this call and out in the world, there is a reason to have your own. If you really want to, I mean, first of all, if you're getting vast amounts of money, it might be worth doing it. If you're running the numbers. But even then, it's probably not worth it. Do you really want to set up a bank if what you really want is a bank account? So almost all the time, I would say that whatever country you're fundraising from, being able to work through a trusted intermediary, and there is a bit of trust because the money comes to us. We could do whatever we want with it. There's no legal requirement that we do it. There is trust that this is what we're there for, and in nearly 30 years, we've not abused that trust. And interestingly, when um, Kirsten was talking about the retention rate. So obviously the question is, do you want to pay a little bit more per annum versus do you want a lower retention rate? Those are all eaten up in the 25%. So at the very least, you're going to get 20% more. At the very
Yes.
best, you're going
Yeah.
to get 24% more. So I mean, it's sort of in the horrible way people say it, it's a no-brainer that if you've got funders in the UK, it's a really important thing. Shall I, at the moment, Kirsten, just move on to talk about this US UK thing whilst we're sort of talking about some of the technical things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Um, for Americans in the UK, there is a special system we have because Americans, because of their citizenship, they are required to file and pay US tax as well as tax in the country that they're living in. They don't have to pay tax twice. I mean, you get credits for where you're paying it, in the thing. But so if you're paying UK tax, you will usually get a credit for the US, but they don't always match up. But for those people, Americans here, and for some British people in the US, our system is worked so that there's a dual benefit for the exact same donation. So, when Kirsten or some other American makes a donation to the UK Foundation, as long as they're paying UK tax, as she said, we would be able to claim gift aid for that donation. So the recipient charity is going to get the 25% in addition. Plus, the American is also going to get a US tax deduction for the exact same donation. So that means that one, if there is any kind of mismatching of tax deductions and things, that's not going to affect them because they're going to get a US tax deduction on their US tax things. And a lot of Americans will still have US income as well because they have assets in America, etc. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And even for those of you who are UK registered charities that are on this call, if you actually have US donors, US American donors that are giving to you, it is worth knowing about this. You're not going to be able to offer it because unless you've got this, you're doing something very special. But you are very welcome to talk to us about facilitating one or two or any of these kinds of donations because it is a significant donation. It is worth knowing that it's possible to do, and it's worth if you do know you've got U.S. donors that to be able to explain to them that they can take this. It's a slightly complicated thing about American tax law as to why it works. Take my word for it. It does work. I was part of the team that was on inventing it, a long time ago. So it does work, and it is worth knowing about because it's a useful thing. It doesn't work with other nationalities because it's only America and somebody else, the Philippines. That's it. The Philippines that actually has this thing about taxing on citizenship. So
Yeah, but just to be clear, you can be a registered charity in any part of the world and still either have an entity in the UK and manage gifts in the way we've just described, or have a chapel in York UK Foundation Fund.
if,
And
if
you
they
do,
yeah, sorry,
yeah.
if they have their own UK charity, they would not be able to offer this unless
No, no, no,
they've
no, no, no.
organized
No,
it.
I mean,
Yeah,
the gift aid, the
yeah,
the benefits of giving in the UK that we talked about before,
yeah,
not the dual US UK. Just
yeah.
to be really clear, if you're a registered charity and you have an entity in the UK and you process gifts through them, you can obviously get gift aid. This is not just for US charities.
That's absolutely correct. It's for
Yes.
anybody. But it's only for U.S. citizens that the dual qualified thing,
Yeah,
the dual do things, but it's a really wonderful opportunity.
it is. And Beatrice has said that it's very clear. Thanks very much.
Good.
Any other questions? And they don't have to be gift aid based questions. They can be questions in general.
Let me just, whilst we're waiting to see if anybody wants to put any more on, let me just mention too that when we talk about the UK, there's sometimes some question of what in the world is this thing called the UK? Because the UK is not a country. The UK is actually a conglomerations of countries. So we've got England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland all are part of the United Kingdom. The Great Britain is actually England, Scotland, and Wales, and some things are and some legal things are actually registered in England and Wales. So the gift aid that we're talking about and all of those things, it works if you've got donors in Scotland. It works if you've got donors in Wales. If you've got it throughout the UK. So it doesn't matter which country or England. It doesn't matter which country people are in. But sometimes that's a bit of a confusion to people too as to how do those countries work together. They all have their own separate laws of some things, and then we have some things together. So we just like to make it as complicated as possible to make sure that it's all quite fun. But so again, wherever your donors were, you would be able to have the benefits of the gift aid.
Yeah, and I did mention that you can't claim gift aid on a legacy or a planned gift. But we can, if you have a UK foundation or if you're a member of the Chaplain York UK Foundation, we can process legacies. We can take planned gifts. We can take gifts in wills. So that's another service that we could provide. And as far as which part of the country you're in, the good news is you only have to know that if you have to take the life in the UK test to become a citizen. So don't worry about a test at the end of this about what country you're in or we're in or what's happening in the UK in general.
Yeah. Kirsten, so you've been a fundraiser for a long time. So and obviously you're here, you've been in the States, etc. I mean, we know that there's differences, there's cultural differences. One of the things here in the UK is a real sense sometimes that people don't like to talk about their philanthropy as much as they do in other countries. And that there is also so that there's and there's sometimes even a reluctance for charities to ask for money. And
There
certainly
is.
people who are not so much the fundraisers, hopefully, but some of other staff, sometimes certainly people that work in universities that are not in the development or advancement teams are a bit more reluctant to do that. So that when you're a foreign organization, it's just probably worth kind of knowing a little, understanding that sometimes that kind of very forceful, in your face sort of thing is sometimes a bit more soft pedaled here. Are there any other things that you would particularly say to people outside the UK, wherever they're from, that really made an impact on you in terms of cultural things that people might want to think about when they're here? In other words, is events a big deal? Is small local things? What things have you noticed?
It's an interesting question, Nancy. First of all, I would say that the perception that Americans talk about their money, are really comfortable talking about their money, is a very culturally specific concept. Growing up on the West Coast, I didn't know anyone who wanted to talk about their money. Growing up in the Midwest, I didn't know anyone who wanted to talk about their money. So I came from an American tradition where that wasn't exactly true. Moving into the UK, what I would say is that there is certainly a sense that British people are very private and they're particularly private with financial information. I would say that is true. I would say you have to approach a donor in a slightly subtler way. But my experience has been if you are a good organization, if you are an organization that is doing good things in the UK or in the rest of the world, uh, people will very often be very happy to talk with you about a gift. And if they are not happy, they will tell you that they're not happy, and you move on to the next person. So I didn't find that particular cultural stereotype useful. I found my experience has been that UK citizens are very generous and they want to help. Now, the thing that I did find that was different is how you recognize them. Uh, in the UK, if you want to recognize somebody on a donor board or on a wall in a building you've just built, or in a program or anything like that, you have to be very, very careful. And you have to be absolutely sure you've talked to the donor about the way that they want to be recognized, because they will be far less likely to want their name on a program, to want their name on a brick, to want their name on a wall somewhere. There are extraordinary circumstances, and there are places that do have names on walls, but I promise you, for every name you see on a wall, there was somebody who said, please don't put my name on a wall. That's not how I want to be recognized. And I found that piece very, very different. So I would say, if you are fundraising in the UK, really think through your stewardship strategy and make sure you have a kind of recognition that is not a public acknowledgement of donations, because I find that to be something that British people tend to be very reserved about, I would say. Nancy, have you had that experience?
Well, I think it's worth knowing. I think it's worth noting that that is something that that just that whole thing of of giving levels and public recognition. At least you need to be thoughtful about it wherever you're from, because obviously
You
other
do.
countries, also European countries, it seems to be a European thing. This whole not wanting to overplay your philanthropy,
Yeah.
but being having very decisions made. It is worth knowing, however, as well, that that there has been concern over the years about GDPR, hasn't there? That
Mhm.
people well, we
There
can't find
has.
out anything about people.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting point too. Unfortunately, that is a stereotype that I think is slightly truer. I do think I know in the US, the privacy laws around personal information, around private information, are far looser than they are in the UK. So there is a limit on we're talking kind of prospect research here. There's a limit on the amount that you can find out about people in the UK. That said, you can still find out quite a lot. You can find out enough that I think donors would be disturbed if they knew how much information was in the public domain about them. So you can still find out information about house prices, for example, or you can make a very good guess about how much somebody earns or what their gift capacity might be, or very often things about their children. If you're talking about somebody with wealth, they are somebody who has been visible for a long time in the public, at least in their industry. So you do end up able to find out quite a lot. You can find information about businesses on Companies House. The Times releases a 50 rich list or 100 rich list every year, and there's information in that. There is a limit. There is a limit. You cannot find as much as you can in the States, but you can absolutely find enough to be able to functionally fundraise. And there are services in the UK who will help you do that if you don't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Would you agree? Would you agree, Nancy?
Absolutely, there's some very good prospect researchers here. There's
Oh,
also
very good.
some very good information about foundations available. In other bits of the world,
Mm.
there's less so. That we call them trusts and foundations, and there's lots of information about institutional grant makers. Basically, again, I think a difference is that sometimes, and you probably found this as well, they don't have the same as some in the States and other places where they have strict grant making guidelines, and here's how you make an application, and here's what it needs to say, and all that. It's often much looser in terms of just write to us and let us know what you want. There's not as much strictness, um, you know, um, in terms of what they're how much you can ask for. So sometimes, which is sometimes difficult, because then you don't know as much about what you're making the application. But this is still a country that has a lot of very good information. Charities Aid Foundation publishes information about foundations. There's a lot of information and a lot of very large grant-making institutional funders as well available here.
Nancy, what I hear a lot about these days in the UK in terms of fundraising is about the cost of living crisis that's happening in the UK, and a sense that that has dampened fundraising outcomes. Would you agree? Do you see that?
I think going back to your point that an organization with a good compelling case for support and need with good fundraising will always be successful. And that's the baseline, I think, of all international fundraising, is to consider what you're doing internationally with the same respect and the same intelligence that you would locally. You know, there is still a lot of opportunity.
And I would add to that, think think really carefully about what the impact of the gift would be. Impact is becoming a theme that I hear all the time in the UK. And honestly, I read it in the US press as well, how important it is as fundraisers to be able to demonstrate the impact of your gift. We now have a question in the chat. Ruth, good points raised about GDPR. Just wondering, would US-based charities in fundraising in the UK be expected to have a privacy policy statement as you would find in UK charities? I think the answer is yes.
I mean,
It would, depending on what kind of fundraising you would do, it probably wouldn't have to be very complicated. I think we tend to overcomplicate privacy policies here. But you would need one, and you would be expected to follow UK privacy guidelines here, just like you would in the US.
yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ruth. It can be a little, yes, GDPR applies to anyone who is a European resident, no matter where the organization interacting with them is based. Yeah. If you do have questions about how that works and what you'd need, please come talk to us because we can help unscramble that.
Great. Well, we're getting near the end. So if you have any questions, you know, obviously pop them on now. We'll be happy to answer them in person. If you think of something later on, and you would like just to have you know, ask a question, feel free to come to either Kirsten or myself or my colleague Jenny Elms, who's been running. She's been the one that's actually been running these UK Friends organizations for non-UK charities, the actual legal entity. And banking here is as big as is a huge issue for money going abroad, just like it is everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And the regulatory things. I think the one thing that you could say is that every place in the world has got regulatory requirements, and every place in the world has got slightly different ones. So, you know, you should always start on the basis that it's going to be different from what you have in your country, whatever country you're in. But we would be delighted to answer any of those questions and or point you in the right direction if that's the way you need to go. So do pop anything else in the chat. Kirsten, anything you'd like to sort of or the final bits now? Anything, you know, what would you like to leave people with?
Yeah, what I'd like to leave people with is the notion that for your organization, there very well may be support in the UK that you're if you don't have a UK foundation that you could potentially be missing. So you can find us. That's a good question. I'm going to put my email in the chat so everybody can find me. But what I would say is don't miss out on income in the UK. There are good options to help support you in that fundraising. And we can certainly explore with you what the possibilities might be. So there's my email. There's Nancy's email in the chat. Please do feel free to talk to us. The very last thing that I would say is one of my hats is executive director of the UK Chapel in York Foundation. My other hat is senior partner at Kearney and Company, which is a UK-based fundraising firm. Working together, Chapel in York and my other organization, Carney and Company, can really help to upscale your fundraising. Chapel in York offers some great international fundraising opportunities and a lot of support. Carney and Company can help you with things like feasibility studies, cases for support, and a whole range of tools that you might need if you wanted to start fundraising in the UK. And I do a lot of consulting in Australia as well. So if we have any Australian organizations who are on the phone today, please do feel free to get in touch with us at Chapel in York. And Jenny's just helpfully popped the general inquiries link in there. So many ways to get in touch with us. There's going to be a recording as well. But honestly, you're not going to be able to get rid of us, is the truth. We are everywhere. But I really want to thank Jenny for helping to run these. This has been really helpful to have her support. And thanks to Nancy, who obviously is the guru here for international fundraising. I always appreciate having her knowledge and wisdom in any kind of international fundraising that I do. Are there any final questions? Fantastic. Well, thank you for spending your Friday, well, our Friday afternoons, may not be your Friday afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for spending your time with us. I hope this has been useful for you. And if you have any questions or are curious about setting up a Chapel in York fund, please do get in touch.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.